Okay, you guys, so I thought we'd just quickly have a chat, have a talk through of brother and sisters. Excuse my voice, I've been a bit sick, so my voice is a bit weird, but we'll just quickly go through it and hopefully that will help you answer some of the questions. So, first of all, this poem is about colonial life and it's inspired by Wright's familial past history and her experiences growing up being on the land, being a farm in a farming community, and it's a comment on the colonial and settler lifestyle, where the settler families in Australia tried to conquer the landscape. But in this poem, what happens is, as the family tries to conquer the landscape, they actually find out that the opposite is happening. The landscape is kind of moving in on them and it is in control, it is in charge. So the themes in this poem are things like reality versus memory, youth versus old age, the significance of family values, and landscape and family's relationship with landscape. Regarding landscape, it's a comment on how landscape can be a memory. As we go through the poem, you'll see towards the end, it's a reflective kind of a poem where family members are reflecting on their past. Characters are shown through memory, the landscape of a memory, and also the physical landscape is the setting of sibling connection. So, first of all, the poem starts off with an allusion to stagnation, where it talks about the road turning out to be a cul-de-sac. So a road has a connotation of something that's possibly a journey, something that's exploratory, exciting, positive, whereas a cul-de-sac kind of is a dead end. And also when we have the word like stopped and lost intention and gate and something that can never be crossed, we have that feeling of stagnation. So we've got that kind of oxymoron or the contrast happening between the road and the cul-de-sac, and how we can look at the family's hopes and dreams and what they wanted to achieve versus the reality of what happened. The use of figurative language and looking at years growing, it says years grew like grass and leaves across the half-erased and dubious track, gives the feeling of development and change. And then in lines 6 through to 10, we've got the use of iambic pentameter, if you have a listen, until one day they knew the plans were lost, the blueprint for the bridge was out of date, and now their orchards would never be planted. The saplings sprouted slyly day by day, the bush moved one step nearer, wondering when. So you've got that pattern of iambic pentameter through those few lines, giving a feeling of the landscape methodically moving nearer and marching forward where the family has no control. A nice use of sibilance with the saplings sprouted slyly, enhancing the feeling of distrust and again being out of control, the sense that nature will overrun them. The polished parlour grew distraite. So you've got an interesting word there, distraite, which I've asked you to have a look at and find out the meaning of that, and also to comment on polished parlour, which is really nice, alliterative effect there. What connotations come up with a polished parlour? What do you visualise? And also the use of that word haunted. And a little bit of personification with the bush there as well. What kind of tone is created through the use of that personification? What is the effect of that personification of the bush moving further? In fact, I've asked you to look at all the different personification uses throughout the poem and to list them and to consider what the effect of that would be. We get the sense that the settlers have no control, and it talks about Millie, Lucy and John, who we assume are the siblings. Each night at 10 wound the gilt clock. What is gilt? I've asked you to look that up. It's also a nice little pun, because the other word that we know that is guilt is that sense of shame or the sense of having done the wrong thing. And so What does Judith Wright want us to think about this settler family? The pianola, similar to the parlour, what connotation does that give you? And then that whole next stanza is a really nice description of the farming lifestyle and what they had to do to survive. Interestingly, Millie's cameos loosen round her throat. What could that possibly mean? And again, the bush comes near, more personification of the bush, and the ranges grow immense. Does that remind you of our previous poem? And what is the effect of that personification? Moving down quickly to the final stanza, there is a change, and we see that in the structure, how she's put it together. She's got the wall, and then groans in the night and settles more awry. I've asked you to look up awry, and to also consider the use of the personification of that wall. Why would the wall be awry? Why? What has gone wrong? Why is the house itself not comfortable? There's almost a sense of it having to defend itself against nature. So now we're in a time that seems to be a little bit more futuristic, where the siblings are now older and they're looking back and reflecting on the time when they were growing up on the land. And it says that their thoughts go fluttering from room to room like moths. I want you to consider the effect of that figurative language of those similes, room to room like moths, and also meet tentative as moths. Millie, are you awake? Oh, John, I have been dreaming. Lucy, do you cry? So are these positive or negative dreams, do you think, that are being described or alluded to here? What is the effect of this symbolism of the moth and stroking a wing, antennae stroking a wing? It's almost like a dreamscape, this final stanza. And then the very, very last line is quite ironic. It says, there is nothing to be afraid of, nothing at all, when it seems as though there is everything to be afraid of, because this stanza is quite fearful. What could they have to be afraid of? Are they afraid of the fact that there's nothing to be afraid of? There's a big sense of emptiness throughout the whole poem, especially that last stanza. The settlers are depicted as almost foolish and weak. There's a feeling of being swallowed up or daunted by the bush. There's a tone of sadness throughout the whole poem. And there seems to be an intense power struggle between the people and the landscape. It's also a little bit of a comment on the effect of time on a person's relationship, or in siblings' relationship, familial relationships, and also the relationship between individuals and the land. We may also consider the dispossession of Aboriginal land, because these settlers are basically invaders who've come and taken over land that does not belong to them and that they are foreigners to. We could also consider the effect of time on the relationship between the individuals and the land, because we've got this progression of time throughout the poem. It seems to have been a very tenuous and hostile experience that this family has had with the landscape. So as responders, we're encouraged to re-evaluate the profound impact that landscape has on our individual identity and also the identity of us as a nation. It also gives us the impetus to reconcile with the landscape. There is so much more in this poem that I don't really have time to go into, but I really want you to interact with the poem, answer the questions, study it carefully. If there's anything else that you notice as you're studying this poem, I would love to hear about it. If you can put some comments on the Google Classroom, that would be awesome.